Hi, guys. Welcome to Cosi Talks Live. All right. For those of you watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. Give me a shout out in the comment section. Say, hey, Cosi, or drop your question in there after the show is done. I do like to go back and answer questions that are from folks watching the replay. But in the meantime, let me say hello to my people who are live here tonight. We got Compadre coming in from Miami. Let's see, we got Chuck from Wyoming. We got Rob in Georgia with coffee in his cup. Scott coming in from cold West Virginia, lemon lime Kool-Aid in his cup. Chuck is excited for tonight's show. We got Mark coming in from Colorado with water as usual, a bit of snow on his ground over there in Colorado. We got Marty from Texas coming in with sweet tea. Jim in cold Ohio with hot chocolate. And Donna Fowler coming in from Wyoming with sparkling water in her cup. All right, we got Pop 19, Paul Pop, Long Island, New York with his flavored water. And we got Susan there with her best buddy, Marshall, coming up for another show. We got Harsh coming in from Richmond, Virginia. Sherry from Orlando. Sherry, you've been becoming a regular on my show, and I love it. I love having my Floridians on the show with me. And she's got her frosted lemonade. We got Morgan saying, perfect timing. I just got done working out, but I don't have anything to drink but water. Morgan, start tanking up. If you just had a workout, water is exactly what you need. And Harsh has water with nuts from Richmond, Virginia. All right, guys, welcome to Cosi Talks. I feel like this time of year, after I finished like my last official sponsored show, which was our amazing Veterans Day show with Integrum. If you haven't had a chance to watch that, you guys, it was just a wonderful show. I had the honor of having Dr. Joseph Alderete on the show, Army surgeon. Fantastic human being, fantastic clinician to give his knowledge. So that was my last official sponsored show for 2025. And I feel like everything for the rest of the year is just kind of like taking a deep breath and gearing up for 2026, which is actually what my team and I are in the process of doing. So really, really excited. Going to spend the next couple of weeks answering your questions and just getting back to that part of the show, which I absolutely love. Hey there, Ben Gregory from Texas. And we got Pastor David on board. Interestingly, though, like the new year is definitely going to start off with a bang. We've got Amputee Coalition National Conference over in Las Vegas coming in January. I know quite a few of you are going to be there. And that kind of brings us to our first question from Robert, who says, I'm locked in for Vegas. Anyone else attending? Let's set up a meet and greet. Hey there, Tom. So guys, quick Cosi poll. How many of you guys are coming to the AC conference in Vegas? How many of you are coming? We got Benny on board over at Instagram over there too. I'm curious. I will be a guest of College Park. This will be, I think, my fourth time going to the Amputee Coalition Conference with College Park. And it's a wonderful, I call it the Scooby Crew. It is always a great time. So we are definitely going to be planning something special. Definitely, I am very much looking forward to meeting and greeting many of you who are there. We've got Richard on board from Texas with his Pellegrino. John C. coming in from San Diego. Yes, Harsh, I definitely want to arrange a meet and greet for sure. We'll definitely be having something planned special from the College Park booth itself. Absolutely. So Jim in Ohio is going to be there. That's awesome. Donna, I'm sorry you're not going to be able to go this time. Robert is going. And Robert, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. We got Pam coming in. She'll be coming in from Indiana. Van Gregory is going. Van Gregory, we got to do a rematch, man. We got to do a rematch run. I got to get myself back in shape so I can keep up with you this time. So yeah. Really, really looking forward to it. I should probably give my official introduction. I haven't done that yet, and I do apologize, guys. For those of you watching the show for the first time, welcome. My name is Cosi Belloso. I'm a physical therapist here in Tampa, Florida. Been a PT now for a little over 23 years, and my passion is working with the amputee and limb loss community. And the reason why I got momentarily distracted is because Mr. Pickles here, or Pepino, as he is known in our household, is having his evening Zoomies. So hopefully he won't knock anything down this time as he did with the last live show. Tina says she's going to AC conference. Scott is going there. I can't wait to see you guys and see the progress that you've made since the last time I saw some of you there. All right, guys, let's get started with some of these questions that came in. Here's a really fun question. This person sent in a message through my texting service and said, how do you know you are ready to try things that you used to do, such as fishing in a boat? A lot of it just depends on the activity itself. You know, if something that you used to do was something like running, right? There are definitely specific parameters for that. One of the things I love do besides teaching folks how to walk again with the use of a prosthesis, my next favorite thing to do is teaching people how to run if they are candidates. Not everyone is a running candidate. Everyone should potentially learn the basic mechanics of running for emergency purposes in case you're being chased by a tiger, right? But as far as making it a sport, it is a very particular criteria and a very particular candidate. So yes, there are definitely certain steps that you go through in terms of definitely strengthening certain muscle groups, getting your body ready for that kind of a high impact sport. And that's something that is best done under the care and supervision of a physical therapist. Okay, that's obviously an extreme case of something of getting back to doing something like fishing in a boat. Again, first thing you need to ask yourself is my prosthesis ready for this particular activity? If you're fishing in a boat, then you can probably bet that your prosthesis is going to be exposed to the elements, whether it's water or salt water. So checking with your prosthetist, making sure, hey, is everything good with my prosthesis to participate in this particular activity? All right. Other things you need to look at is access. How are you going to access the boat? How are you going to access the pool? That's a big one, obviously, here in Florida, because our pools are open 365 days a year, 24/7, right? So how are you going to access the pool or the particular activity that you want to get to? Ironically enough, that's what I find usually is the blocking point for people. Like, how do I get to said location? How do I get myself to the boat? How do I get myself across the sand? Obviously, I'm using a lot of Florida type references of things that we run into here. How do I get myself from standing to sitting on the pool deck and into the pool and then back out again, right? So things like that, how to troubleshoot those things. And then obviously the last thing and very important thing is, what does your strength and balance need to look like from a safety standpoint to do this activity? Right? And guys, I don't say all these things to make it sound like, oh, it sounds kind of daunting. Sometimes you just got to get out there and try it. Okay. The biggest thing when you're trying any of these new activities, when you're coming back from amputation, is common sense and safety, right? Use your common sense in whatever environment and activity you're going into, and think of it how you would have if you weren't an amputee. Does this activity make sense for me? Okay. And second of all, safety, right? If I go, I need to make sure, probably if it's the first few times, whatever the activity is, not to go by myself, and just make sure I have a contingency plan for safety purposes. And then other than that, a lot of times with a lot of these activities, it's do however it makes it work, right? Again, the first example that comes to mind is how you get into and out of a pool, right? I've helped many a patient get back to the pool and helping them figure out how to access the pool, right? And I've learned everybody does it a little differently, and you have to kind of go in with an open mind, right? A calm mind, but an open mind, and try different ways and different techniques and different strategies. One thing I definitely would say is, regardless of the activity, if it's something that you really love, something that brings you joy in your life, figure it out, right? And find the people that are going to help you figure that out. So whether it's a cuckoo crazy physical therapist who's willing to go out to the pool with you and help you figure out how to get into that pool, or a out of the box thinking prosthetist who can construct something with your prosthesis that will allow you to do the activity, okay? But get back to your life, okay? When it comes to my patient care, I don't just think of, oh, I'm going to teach my patient how to walk. I'm thinking, I want my patient to get back to their life, okay? So I want to know about all the crazy things that they want to do, and within reason, help them figure out how to do it. Yes? Let's see. Robert says, I'm 60 and I can run like a snail. Hey, that's all. You just got to run faster than the person behind you. That's what I always say. We got Emily coming in from Central PA, running a bit late, peppermint mocha, cold brew. She always has the best drinks right there. 19 Pop says, sorry, not ready for prime time yet. And guys, that's fine. You're not competing against the people around you. You're competing against yourself, truly. Okay. And it's a fine balance between pushing yourself and saying, I'm not going to give up on this, and I'm going to keep pushing and moving forward and taking steps to get to where I want to go, and tempering it with, okay, what is realistic for me to be able to do at this point in my life where I'm at right now? Mark says, Cosi, you're exactly correct. Just do it. I know. Nike had it right, man. Nike had it right with their saying right there. We got Cindy in North Carolina with water in her mug. All right, let's take a look over here. Make sure we're not missing any folks from Instagram. We got quite a few folks popping in on Instagram. We got Mark on board. Creates Art is on as well. You can't hear me on Instagram. I'm not sure why that would be, Mark. All better. Okay, now you can hear me. Great. Awesome. We got Grande Rojo on board as well. We got Max San on board as well. All these handles are always fun to try to read. All right. Stacy says, I can't run. That was my original down to my OI until I remembered I hate running. Guys, and seriously, yeah. And I'm going to go off on a little like soapbox tangent here when it comes to running. Okay. A lot of people, they have that stuck in their head. Like they have the amputation. They, are getting through those initial phases of recovery. They get their prosthesis and they just wake up one day and say, I want to be able to run. And, it's one of those things where you go, okay, were you a runner prior to your amputation? Okay. And guys, this is not me saying there's limits to amputees and they're running. No. It's just me being realistic. Okay. If you look at the world around you, think about just like your first degree, second degree acquaintances that you know. How many of them are dedicated runners? Like, think about it, guys. And, think about it. How many people with two anatomical legs that you know of that are dedicated runners, meaning that is their sport of choice, or as I like to call it, my drug of choice, right? And that they are weekly pounding the pavement, right? Unless you yourself are an avid runner and that is your community, chances are you don't know too many people in your life that are active runners. Why? Because running is really hard on the human body. It's actually pretty brutal, okay? I myself am a runner. I can tell you firsthand, it is a brutal sport, okay? And to maintain the ability to run without injuring oneself, you got to do a lot of work and a lot of upkeep. Okay. And I can speak from personal and professional experience. There's a reason why you have running specialist physical therapists, because runners are constantly injuring themselves, right? So I always find it interesting that sometimes amputees who have never run before prior to their amputation, they say, I want to be able to run. Okay. And I have to kind of weigh that carefully and just say, okay, what is your motivation behind this particular goal? Is it a genuine interest to want to take up running? Which we see that all the time. I came late in life to running. I was in my ripe mid 30s when I decided to finally start running. Okay. So I had to pick it up slowly and take the steps, and I became a successful runner. Okay. But if it's not something that you did prior to amputation, you got to think about what is your motivation behind it. Is it because there's a lot of hype around amputees who run and you got to get caught up in all that in the emotion of it, which is kind of cool. Okay. Or is it something that you're genuinely interested in doing because you're interested in the sport itself, because you're interested in using that as a way to stay fit, and you are willing to put the time in to do it properly? Okay. Because I'll tell you what, if as a two-legged runner, you have to do a lot of upkeep to prevent injuries. As a one-legged runner, or even as a bilateral amputee runner, you really have to put in a lot of time and dedication into keeping your body healthy. Yeah. So I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but I do want people to understand. Now, that being said, I've had some people that they did not run prior to their amputation. They took up running responsibly after their amputation, and they're marvelous. They are marvelous athletes and runners, and it's amazing to give someone that gift. I think back to the very first person I had when I opened up my practice, not my first runner, when I first opened up my practice. And this lovely woman, she was 72 years old. She had been an amputee since her early 20s. So she was a very experienced amputee. She was in phenomenal shape. She practiced, I think, Pilates. She walked 3 miles a day. She was in fantastic shape. And she came to me and she said, look, I want to learn how to run. Okay. And, just kind of took me by surprise. And I said, okay, let's take a look. And she was a great candidate. And we taught her how to run, and she did a race, and I did the race with her, and it was fantastic. Okay. But that was a case of a woman who was already in fantastic shape. She was very athletic, and she was willing to put in all that time and effort. Yeah. Mark says, maybe it's the cool running blade that is interesting to them. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And especially, it's great because in like pop culture right now, I think we're seeing so many more amputees, right? We're seeing amputee models. We're seeing more of the Paralympians coming out. We're seeing them in the movies. We're seeing them more, and a lot of them featured are with these really cool looking running blades, guys. I get it. It looks really, really cool, and you get hyped up. But again, it's just taking a moment and saying, okay, am I willing to put in the time and dedication? Okay. And is it something I really, really like? Okay. Or am I getting caught up in the hype? So Stacy just said it right there. She goes, I thought I should be able to run. And then I realized I really don't like running. And Stacy is in incredible shape. She's an avid horsewoman, right? So I guess what I'm trying to say is, enjoy the hype, right? Enjoy it, but don't get caught up in it, and think about what is going to be best for you to do and what's going to truly bring you joy. Let's see. Hey there, comadre. What's going on? I got comadre and compadre on board tonight. It's a good night, man. Robert says, I found riding a mule at the Grand Canyon was fun. Right there. All right, Robert, let's bring it back to the question of how do you know you're ready to try things you used to do? So, Robert, how did you know that you were ready to go ride a mule at the Grand Canyon? That's really kind of cool. Stacy said, literally the only time I am bummed about not running is if there is a loose horse. True story. Stacy, I can believe you, because I can also imagine, it's the kid that runs away from you. And guys, for the most part, if it's realistic for my patients, even if they're not going to become runners, I do try to teach my patients the basics of a kind of run. It's kind of a hop skip run, and it's basically for emergency purposes. Like you're crossing the street and you see a car coming and you've got to move with purpose to get out of the way of that car. Your kid runs away from you and you got to chase after your kid. In Stacy's case, she's got an ornery horse that's taking off for the hills and she's got to go after that horse, right? Tom says, no, I wasn't a runner, but I am now. And Tom's a really fantastic story right there. He's an incredible athlete. Bill says, oh, there's Bill with water in his jug. Hey there, Bill. Peter says, I'll be there at AC. Oh, great. Dealing with hip and knee contractions at 14 months after surgery, still healing, no prosthetic yet, and decaf here. Well, Peter, I look forward to meeting you at the conference. Monette says, hello from St. Louis with water. We've got Josh saying, my advice to an above knee is master first running without a knee, then be very careful because free swing knees are no joke. No kidding, Josh. You are not kidding. My friend Robin, she's an AK. She's an incredible athlete. She did Ironman. And she explained it to me once because she runs with a straight pylon. So she does not use a knee joint when she runs as an AK. And I said, well, Robin, come on, let's work together. And she goes, Cosi, you don't understand. It's like you're running 100 yards and someone tells you there's 10 trap doors in those 100 yards, but they're not going to tell you where those trap doors are. That's what it's like to run with a knee as an above the knee amputee. And I go, whew, yeah, that does kind of give me a better analogy of what's going on. And again, what's interesting, and here's another little like soapbox moment right here, Josh. I used to be really against running with a straight pylon. Why? Because you have to circumduct when you run, right? And that bugged the bejesus out of me, especially as a physical therapist. So guys, here's what I mean. When someone is circumducting, let me see which Bob. We'll use little, whoa, I just pulled down that tree. I am making a mess today of the Cosi Talks studio. Okay. Between Mr. Pickles and myself, we are trashing this place. Okay. So here's little Bob. Isn't he funny? We got Big Bob and Little Bob. So when the person is circumducting when they're running, so if this is their prosthesis and they have a straight pylon, meaning there's no knee, they have to run swinging their leg out. And that used to drive me nuts as a physical therapist because all I'm imagining is all this terrible back pain and hip pain and issues that people are going to start having. But I looked up the literature and it actually showed that there's not necessarily a greater incidence of back pain for amputee above the knee runners who run with the circumducted gait. And believe me, no one was more surprised than myself to read that literature. So I have reformed my ways. And I have accepted the fact that some people will run with a straight pylon, and that is how they run. And, you learn as you go, right? But yes, if you are able to try to run and learn to run with a knee joint, obviously that's going to mimic the human running cycle better. And I would encourage you to try to do that, especially if you have a running therapist who lives nearby you. And this is where it can get kind of fun, because if you are someone who is a higher athletic level, you don't necessarily, I mean, it's good to learn the running mechanics from a physical therapist like myself, who's amputee specialized and everything like that. But kind of once you get going with your running, connecting with a physical therapist who's a running specialist can be really, really beneficial, because that's all they do. And it's kind of cool. Morgan says, I injured myself more running than I did downhill mountain biking in my fully lived life. Yeah. Yeah. And guys, I'm a physical therapist. I started later in life with running, which means I didn't have all those chronic injuries from my earlier years. And obviously, as a physical therapist, I know how to do strengthening. I still get injuries and things like that, and I have to be very careful with it. But like I said, it's my personal drug of choice, so I just enjoy doing it. Josh says, no joke. And I'm like, yeah, no. Hey, there's my other physical therapist right there, Paul, right there, guys. Amazing physical therapist right there. Robert says, my wife challenged me and I did it. My wife is a great motivator. I like to think a lot of husbands will say that. There's a Cosi poll. Let's see. Tom says, I was 46 when I started running. Yeah. Jamie, oh, there's my girl Jamie there from Integrum saying good evening to us and cheers. Let's see. Josh says, take the levitate blade, for instance. If you don't hit that 2x2 tread each step, you're going down. Don't ask me how I know. Yeah. And guys, running, like I said, I love it. I love teaching amputees how to run who are candidates, but you do need to be responsible about it. And then the other thing that you have to consider, and again, I'm not saying this to be a Debbie Downer. You got to take this into consideration. If you're running and you injured your sound leg, right, you're out of commission. And believe me, as a therapist, that is something that I take very seriously. And I always have that on my mind when I'm talking to someone about potentially starting running training. Like, I really want them to know what they're getting into. This is probably why I don't never say never, but I don't think I will ever see myself doing a mass running clinic like you sometimes see. And I know there's several organizations out there that do it, and I think it's fantastic and I think it's great. For me as a clinician, it gets my blood pressure up, because I just think of all the potential things that can happen. And I also just like working really one-on-one with people when it comes to running, because there's just so many moving pieces there that to be able to keep it safe and be able to really teach someone properly. But again, that's just me. That's how I feel about it. Emily says, do running blades have knees? Trying to picture how I've seen Paralympians run. No. So running blade, when we're referring to the running blade, that's just the foot. That is the foot part of it. And there's a couple of different types of running blades, depending on if you are looking to go sprinting, in which case the blade has a harder feel to it because you got to put more power into it to get the power out, or whether you are a long distance runner. Now, your typical weekend warrior that you'll see out there jogging, running, they're going to have more of the endurance, long-term marathon type blade. Okay. And then when it comes to the above the knee runner, they can choose to put a knee, or they can choose to forego the knee and it's just a long pylon. Okay. And then the blade is attached as a foot, as you would attach any other foot. Well, not as any other foot, but it's a foot, right? Mark says, do the straight pylon runners use energy returning foot? Oops. So they will also use the blade. So ideally it's the blade. And that's the other thing. We've talked a little bit on the show about running and blades and things like that. So usually what happens is when I have someone come in who wants to learn how to run, and I've determined, yes, in fact, they are a good running candidate. If they have not used a blade yet, okay, and I have to usually clear it with the prosthetist, usually I will teach them the basic mechanics of running on their current foot. The reason is because the people who are typically candidates for running, they are probably using some sort of energy storing or dynamic response foot. And the foot can usually take the forces of gentle running or simple jogging. Okay. So the example I like to use most is my buddy Damon here. I'll show you Damon. So Damon is this good looking guy right here. He's my below the knee model for my book. So when Damon came to me, he was a very experienced walker. You couldn't tell that he was an amputee when he was wearing his pants, long pants, and he's a below the knee. And he was interested in running. And we had to do a lot of strengthening first to get him ready for running. There was a lot of kind of remedial work from a strengthening standpoint that he had to do. And at the time, he was wearing the Philauer All Pro foot, which is a fantastic foot, really fantastic foot. And, you know, and speaking to his prosthetist, I got, you know, the blessing to go ahead and teach him how to run on that foot. And so what we did is we worked on the mechanics of running, got him comfortable with that. And when he was running a mile consistently and his skin was tolerating it well, his joints were tolerating it well, and he was able to cardiovascularly do the mile without a problem, then at that point we went ahead and said, okay, now let's have you go and test different running blades. Okay. And I'm glad we waited because he needed to really understand what the mechanics of running felt like as an amputee so that then he could appreciate the differences in the running blades. Does that make sense, guys? So, and you know, those of you who have running blades, you know, they are very, very expensive, right? So you kind of really need to know what you're choosing when you get that running blade. And, you know, so he wouldn't have been able to appreciate the difference if he didn't know the running mechanics first. So that can sometimes also be a little tricky path in saying, okay, I don't want you to make such a huge decision on picking a running blade before you learn how to run, but we got to make sure that the current foot you're on can withstand the forces of simple jogging and simple running, because we don't want to damage your everyday foot either. Right. And then you kind of also lump into it a proper socket and the alignment that you would need to do for running, which is going to be different than the alignment that you would do for walking. So lots of little factors there. And I know I'm like totally nerding out right now, but things to think about when you are, you know, examining some of these different things. The nice thing is that for a lot of the sports that most people want to do, they can do it in the current foot that they are in. Truly, the sport that I say, no, you absolutely need a running blade if you're going to be serious about doing it is running. Okay. A lot of these other sports don't necessarily benefit from having a running blade. Okay. All right. Let's see. Yeah, a lot of comments coming in. Bill says, I took up wheelchair racing and had a blast. Yes. And guys, that's the thing. There really is something out there for everyone. Okay. So remember what I said, even folks with the 2 anatomical legs, small percentage are actual dedicated runners. Why? Because we have so many different ways in this world on how to keep up our fitness. And definitely, if, you know, as you know, an athlete with a disability, you have then all the sports that are done with wheelchair, and there's a lot of workout that can be done there. Bill says 6 marathons. Holy cow, Bill. I had no idea. That's a lot of marathons. That's a lot of marathons. Holy cow. How are your shoulders doing? Robert says, I'm volunteering with the Special Olympics. The VA will give me a leg once I know what field I will be coaching. That is awesome. That is awesome. Mark says, I'm able to jog with my Philauer All Pro XST. No, guys, I have to say, like, if I had to list my top 5 prosthetic feet that are my favorites, Philauer All Pro is definitely on that list. It definitely checks off a lot of boxes, and it's a very common thing that a lot of prosthetists like. It's very rare that you hear prosthetists agreeing all, like when you get a room full of prosthetists, that they will all agree on one thing that they like in terms of prosthetic componentry. Like they all have their different opinions. Universally, I would say the Philauer All Pro is the one thing that I find every prosthetist that I encounter, they're like, yeah, man, good foot, right? Like, it's just one of those things, right? All right. Pastor David says, oh my, I absolutely loved running when I had 2 good legs, but it was awfully hard on my joints then. I could not imagine running and left me with knee and hip issues. Now with a left above the knee amputation, even harder on the joints and even more difficult, but possible. Hats off to those who can. I'll walk or use a treadmill now. Yeah. And guys, Don't underestimate the power of walking. Really do not underestimate the power of walking. I read a really great article the other day. And those of you who are runners, you appreciate the term junk miles, right? So when you're a runner, okay, you're not running 10 miles a day, right? You have to build that foundation, build that base. And the majority of the days that you're running, you're actually running very slowly and not huge long distances, right? And you save your energy so that on the 2 days of the week that you really go hard, you have the ability to do that. It's really the same with walking, guys. You can treat walking like a running sport and train accordingly and get pretty much the same benefits and sometimes even better because of the fact that you're not dealing with all of these injuries. Okay. The common thread that I see among my 80 and 90-year-olds that are still independent in their life, meaning they're not using a walker or a cane, they're all walkers. They're all walkers. And this is just me, my Cosi knowledge of, a few years around the sun and working in healthcare for over 30 years, right? Where when I just looked at all of the people I've ever met in my life, whether as patients, family members, community members, people I meet everywhere, my 90-year-olds and even some of my centenarians, right, that are still walking without a walker or a cane, they are walkers. They're walkers. Like that was their sport. That at some point in their 50s or 60s or even 70s, when they couldn't ride a bike anymore, perhaps, or they couldn't run anymore, and they took up walking, those are the ones that make it into their later years and not using a walker or crutches. See, Josh says, pretty sure the Ottobock knee is the only running knee, but in high school, I played basketball and baseball on a Satch foot and single axis hydraulic knee and free swing. And yes, you don't need special equipment to be active. Walk to the run modes. I feel no difference. Feels the same in my Orion as the Brain Robotics knee or the Navi. Yeah. And Josh, oh my gosh, funny story. The first person I ever taught how to run was on a Satch foot. Yeah. Because back when I started practicing and dinosaurs walked the earth, we only had like 2 or 3 feet, right? Nobody got a running blade. I had never even seen a running blade until I was in practice like 15 years before I had my first patient with an actual running blade, right? And it was this, I'll never forget it. It was this 20-year-old kid, young buck, great shape, and he was in his college drum line. And when he first came to see me and he's explaining, I'm asking him, what is that you want to get back to doing? And he's like, well, I want to do drumline. And I'm like, drumline? He's like, yeah, drumline. And he's like, watch the movie. I think there was a movie out there with that famous actress. And of course, it just flew out of my brain. But it's incredibly active. Like they do all these crazy moves, breakdancing moves, going into splits, running and jogging, all while they're playing the drums. It's incredible. And I'm sitting there going, this kid's got a wooden foot and he wants to learn how to run and do drumline. All right, game on. So, and it was interesting. It was actually Bob Gailey came over to consult with that patient to teach me how to teach a person how to run. And I'm sitting there and I'm 6 months pregnant with my first baby, trying to control this 20-year-old kid, making sure he's not falling and trying to teach him how to run with a 6-month belly. And then I see my supervisor, his name was Curtis, and he's just sitting there shaking his head. And I know he's just thinking to himself, oh, geez, I should have made her sign a waiver. Like it was a Satch foot. And then the prosthetist comes out and starts hooping and hollering at me because he's saying I was going to break the foot. But we got through it. It was a lot of fun. You see Mr. Pickles back there. Lots of fun. But yes, I think the Ottobock knees are definitely my favorite when it comes to the running knees. But yeah, Josh, there's a lot of knees you could run on. Now, whether the knee is meant to withstand that force and whether you're going to break the knee or break the foot, that's something you're supposed to kind of clear with the prosthetist. And that's what I have to say as a responsible therapist. There, is that it? Disclaimer done. All right. Bill says rotator cuff issues now. And guys, I will say that. Okay, this guy's going nuts. He's got the evening kitten zoomies. Yeah, and I will say that that's another caveat, guys, for those of you who are wheelchair athletes, those of you who are using crutches a lot and walkers, definitely when it comes to rotator cuff injuries and preserving the integrity of your shoulder, it's something you definitely want to think about. Let's see. Emily says, I was a competitive horseback rider for about 15 years pre-amputation. I was in such good shape then, and I miss it. And Emily, I know there's adaptive equine therapy. It's interesting. It's something, and actually, if Paul is still on, he will I know he'll want to jump in on this one. The discovery of how the benefits of horseback riding for children with cerebral palsy. So once upon a time, it was thought that doing strength training with children with cerebral palsy was just going to increase their tone and their spasticity. And we found out, I think it was probably in the 80s, Paul, you can remind me on this one, that, it was actually the opposite, that strengthening these kids helped them move through their tonicity and spasticity. And it was something that they did with the horse therapy. All right, this guy is, come back here. Okay, there. It's crazy. This is my life, guys. This is my life right there. That is my life with 4 kids and 6 chickens and a dog and this crazy cat who's going to just, anyways. Let's see. Cindy says, please remember to go over your protocol start of using the prosthesis after the ulcer. Yes, let's do that. Okay. So actually, let me just finish these comments. Harsh says, I try to walk 10 kilometers daily. Harsh, that's amazing. You are going to be that 102-year-old that's walking around without a cane or walker. It's going to be you. Charlie says, I'd love to walk more, but I'm dealing with a Morton's neuroma on my good foot. Oh, and those can be so much fun. Oh, so much fun, Charlie. And again, this is where, again, the help of a good podiatric physical therapist. I'm not kidding, guys. We have these little micro specialties in my field. They are game changers, Charlie. Game changers. Harsh said, tried to run with Cosi in person. You didn't try to run, Harsh. You ran. Okay, I remember that. You did a really good jog. You did really good. Nick Cannon. Thank you, Emily. What was the name of that movie? Was it called Drumline? It was Nick Cannon and the other beautiful actress that she went on to be on the Guardians of the Galaxy. She's in that movie, the green gal. This is going to bug me. This is going to bug me. Let's see. Stacy is saying, what is your reason for not doing it anymore? Message me if you want help or motivation. Emily, meet Stacy. Stacy, meet Emily. You two should talk. Yeah, Sherry's like, he's gotten big. Yeah, he's eating like he's like a teenage boy. He's eating like all the time. Let's see. Robert misses the chicks. We're just going to turn this into a farm show, guys. Glenn says, Mr. Pickles makes Cosi Talks even more entertaining. He makes for a great conversation piece. Susan says, I was walking without any aid. Then my heart failed, which also caused my lungs to fail. And they tried to use the artery in my leg to attach to VA ECMO machine. And I started to bleed to death, got a compartment syndrome in my thigh. Now I can no longer walk without aid, but happy to report I've progressed to using a cane after a lot of hard work. Try, and try harder. Yes. Get knocked down 77 times, get up 78. And yeah, I do keep count. Hey there, Earl from California. 10K steps. Still very good, Harsh. Whether it's 10 kilometers or 10K steps, it's amazing. I was like, 10 kilometers? How do you even have time to walk 10 kilometers a day? That's pretty amazing. Emily says, I did adapted equine therapy for 20 years. My dad would help me mount the horse. I haven't ridden since 2015, and my dad died in 2018. Paul, there's my Paul right there. He says, 1990s, my pediatric therapist at Miami Children's Hospital finally started listening to me about strength training and CP. Horseback riding is outstanding for core muscle strength and pelvic floor strength. Leg strength, of course, a side benefit. Absolutely. And Stacy, I know, girl, you're going to be on my show at some point, and we're going to talk about the benefits of horse therapy, because I know you're not the only horse gal on my show. And I think it's really, I completely agree with Paul. It is a great workout. It's a great work. It's a beautiful workout. You're out in nature. You're just getting in the sun, touching grass, all that kind of really cool, fun stuff that's good for the human being. Drumline. So the movie is called Drumline, Donna? It was called movie. Zoe Saldana. Thank you. Oh my gosh. I don't know why I had such a hard time remembering her name. It's a fun movie. I remember I was just like, I feel goofy watching this high school or college movie, but it's a really fun movie. And it was my patient basically saying, this is what I do. This is what I need to get back to doing. And I'm just sitting there scratching my head going, okay, let's do this. We're going to figure it out. It was a really fun case, Grande Rojo says, in Israel, getting over some jet lag with some strong coffee. Grande, what are you doing in Israel, man? Holy cow. We've got Pilar Coach on board. We got Bernard on board as well. And Simone, thank you for joining in on the Instagram channel. All right. Yes, that's the movie I was talking about, Donna. Fun movie, cute movie. All right, let's go back to Cindy. So Cindy said, hope your Thanksgiving was wonderful. Mine was. Since back in my chair, my daughter and granddaughter took over. Thanks for the in-depth answer. Could you give more detailed list of how I should start using the prosthesis when the scab goes away? Nowhere near that yet. I see the prosthetist on the 11th, and I will, of course, ask him for his protocol. I am so thankful. Popped up on my feet a few months after my amputation. You're a blessing to me. Well, thank you, Cindy. I appreciate that. So, guys, just kind of a recap. Miss Cindy had the unfortunate incident of having a skin abrasion opening. It healed, and then she proceeded to wear her leg for 8 hours on the day that she started wearing her leg again. Why? Because she was an experienced walker, and it just made sense to put her leg on and get back to life because her skin had healed. Unfortunately, what happened was that the skin reopened again, and now she's looking at a bit of an ulcer. Thankfully, Cindy is getting help and under the care of a doctor who seems to understand wound care and understands not to let her wear a prosthesis until that wound is completely closed. But obviously, there's a lot of anxiety and some fear about what could this possibly mean, right? So last week we talked about saying it's okay, you're under a doctor's care, and specifically you're under a doctor's care who understands wound care for amputees, and that's a huge win right there. Now the question is, what do you do in the meantime? And then how do you get back into walking? Okay. And it just so happens, guys, I do have a case right now that I'm working on in the clinic of a very similar case. This particular individual had a very severe stage 3, stage 4 ulcer. And it took several months to heal, right? So this was a pretty extreme case, right? And right now we're working with this individual to get them back into the prosthesis and get them back into walking, okay? So while the wound is healing, y'all know where I stand. You are not wearing that prosthesis. That prosthesis does not go anywhere near your skin, okay? And the reason why I'm saying this so firmly is because unfortunately, there are some clinicians who will tell their patients, it's okay to wear your prosthesis while your skin is healing. We've got it bandaged well. No. And I've heard doctors say this. I've heard prosthetists say this. I've heard physical therapists say this, guys. No. If your skin is broken or open, you do not put your prosthesis on because it will just continue to break and open. I don't care how much padding you put on it. If anything, the more padding and bandaging you put on it, the more pressure you're putting on it when it's in the prosthesis, okay? Now, once the skin is healed, what you have to remember is there's 3 phases of healing. You have an inflammatory phase where everything is swollen and red and dramatic and gory. Then you have the proliferative phase where all the fibers are starting to heal and everything looks like it's closing on the outside, okay? And then the remodeling phase, phase 3, that's when all the inside work is going on. And that's the stuff that we can't necessarily see, but it's going on underneath the skin. Okay. So even though on the outside, the skin might be closed, on the inside, you still have a lot of remodeling where the scar tissue fibers are laying down and kind of settling in. So if you put on your prosthesis for 8 hours right after that skin has closed, you're going to reopen it up again, right? And it's frustrating for individuals who are already experienced walkers. And we covered this last week, right? Because they're like, I already know how to walk. Just put my leg on and go, right? It's not like when you first started learning to use your prosthesis and you had to take your time just because you just didn't know how to walk in it yet, right? Okay. So when you get back to your wearing schedule, first things first, you got to figure out what it was that caused that opening. Sometimes it's very obvious. The socket was loose and you didn't get a proper fit with the socks and boom, friction, you got an opening in the skin. That's an easy way to identify. Sometimes it's not so easy to identify what it is. Okay. But that's the priority. Identify what it was that caused the skin to open and then fix it. Right? Go back to that prosthetist. So the particular individual that I'm working with right now, the socket was too big and it needed to be replaced, right? So now we're working with the prosthetist to get that socket remade. And we're actually working with a new prosthetist and working to get that socket remade, okay? And the prosthetist and I are communicating with each other all the time. Now, because this particular individual spent several months in a wheelchair, okay, and unable to walk, There's a lot of deconditioning that we have to work through. There's a lot of things going on with the hips and with the knees because they were sitting in a wheelchair. So there's a lot of mechanics that we have to help the person reestablish. Okay, and again, this is an extreme case. This is someone who was in the wheelchair for several months. So we do have a lot of remedial work to do there. Okay, it's not just putting the leg on and walking. Why? Because a lot of these muscles are weak. There's a lot of range of motion that is missing. And if we don't get that all back in there, we're going to lead to injuries down the line. Okay. All right. So then when it comes to wearing the leg, in this person's case, their skin, I'm watching it like a hawk. I'm going to watch it like a hawk. So I'm going to put this person on a beginner wearing schedule, meaning the minute they put their liner on, I start the clock and I give them 5 minutes. So they have 5 minutes to put the liner on, put the leg on, stand up, and do some very simple activity. And then I have the person sit down, take everything off, and we examine that skin. Okay. It doesn't take long for a blister or something to form. Okay. So I only give them 5 minutes, and I'm training my patients on this, guys. We start the stopwatch on the phone, wherever it is. Okay. And then we look at the skin and we see how it's responding. If it's red and hot and bothered and glaring, okay, then we know we're done for the day. And we have to wait until that redness subsides. And maybe later on in the day, if that redness has subsided, then we can try another 5 minutes. Okay. But we take it slowly. We have to let the skin acclimate again. Okay. So I start with the 5-minute rule. If we take the prosthesis off, pinkness and redness subsides, then we can put it on again, start the clock the minute the liner touches the skin, and we give them another 5 minutes. And we do simple activity, just weight shifting. And again, we're looking to see how is the skin reacting, okay? Especially in this case, this individual is going to have a new socket, okay? So we really need to see what's going on in that socket that we're building. We're changing a few things in that socket. We're giving them a different suspension system. We're just changing the shape of that socket. So we want to monitor that skin. And then on a personal note, I'm like, this person already went through hell, you know, having to go through months of healing that wound. The last thing I want to do is give them a paper cut, right? I want to protect that skin because I don't want to set them back any further. And guys, it's not like you're just twiddling your thumbs while you're waiting for your skin to acclimate. There's a lot of strengthening that you can be doing. Okay. And again, in some ways, it's a little tiny blessing in disguise that this person is going to have to take their time with their skin, because it means that we get to really get them nice and strong so that when they really get going with their walking, they're not going to run the risk of chronic injury. Okay. Now, again, guys, I love my prosthetists. They're wonderful human beings, but I find that a lot of prosthetists will say, you know, you can wear your leg for about an hour or two and then take it off. It's too much. It's too much. If you're coming off a wound like that, or if you're just starting to wear your prosthesis, you're talking minutes at a time. Minutes at a time. And then when you take off your prosthesis, having your prosthetist look, having your therapist look, okay, and say, okay, this is where we expect to see pink and red. This is where we should not be seeing it. And this is what you need to look for. And this is what you need to do if that pink or redness is there. Okay. And then as the time goes on and you say, okay, you were wearing it for 5 minutes at a time, 3 times a day, your skin is handling it very well. Let's move you and bump it up to 10 minutes a day. And again, I'm talking about cases that are very, very sensitive skin. Okay. The other thing you need to take into account, I know I'm kind of throwing the kitchen sink at you guys right now, but just things to kind of think about in this particular individual where they had that wound, there's a scar there now, right? And we've got some places where that scar is adhered, it's stuck, right? So now we got to work on getting that scar loosened up so that when the prosthesis goes on top, it doesn't shear that scar. Okay, so things that you got to take, again, not things your prosthetist and things that your therapist need to be taking into account as you acclimate getting back into your leg. And guys, I've had some doozies of cases. I've had some people that I look at them the wrong way and they turn red. Okay, and I've gotten them successful with wearing their prosthesis full time. It just takes a little bit longer. Okay, just takes a little bit longer. All right, let's see what it says. Woo, we had a lot of, I talked too much. I didn't read all these comments. Let's get through these comments. Let's get through it. Stacy says, core strength advice I live by. I would love to talk horses with you and anyone interested. Equine therapy has numerous benefits for both physical and emotional and mental rehabilitation. Girl, it's a show. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. And Jamie's listening in tonight. So, you know, we got it. Dead to rights right there. Emily says, my sister studied music education. She said the movie is musically inaccurate. Oh, there's a lot of inaccuracies, I'm sure. Yeah. Dick Devers coming in from West Virginia late, but I made it. Glad to have you here. Let's see. Robert says, I find doing adventures such as cruises and visiting national parks has challenged me in a positive way and allowed me to discover I could figure it out and do more than I thought. Paul says, Kevin, his son, broke 2 carbon fiber feet in one basketball season when he was 12 or 13. I remember that. I remember you came into work and you were grousing because you're like, the kid broke another foot. But he's back to his first love of sports now in his 30s with judo 2 to 3 times a week. Love hearing that. Mark says, though I had to make some modifications, I was back on my motorcycle shifting with a button less than 8 months after my amputation, and I helped another amputee motorcycle rider get back on his. Just kind of breathe to the mic. Can't keep a good dog down, man. If there's a sport, if there's an activity that you love, you figure out how to get back into it. You figure it out, right? Hart says, for all of those who love to visit national parks, ensure you get a year free lifetime access as specially abled people. Love that. Paul says, never wear your prosthetic when a wound is present. Seen some real horror shows over my years, especially in those with neuropathy or vascular compromise. Yeah. Paul, between you and I, we could write an encyclopedia on what happens when you wear a prosthesis with a wound care present. And the part that really gets my goat is when my patient tells me my prosthetist, my doctor, or my physical therapist said I could do this. That's the part that just makes me go. Anyways, Robert says 100% agree. Hope so. Harsh says, all U.S. citizens visit any national parks free of charge, including vehicles. They are writing for all family and friends with it. That's a really cool perk right there. Let's see. Penny says, I would stay in a wheelchair as much as possible, maybe exercise with the prosthesis for an hour or 2 each day to keep up your strength. Stay where there is carpet only, use a cane. A wheelchair is much more stable than a prosthesis. Penny, I have to respectfully disagree. If you mean, it just depends, right? There are some folks who are amputees that they are full-time prosthetic users and they use their prosthetic leg as they used their anatomical leg. And they were successful in getting back to their mobility that way. And then you have folks at the other end of the spectrum that they do not use a prosthesis at all. And they use wheelchair as their primary mode of mobility. And there can be several reasons for that. And then you have everything in between. You have some people who are part-time wheelchair users, part-time prosthetic users. For me, again, and this is just from my experience as a physical therapist, I always try to see what is the max that we can get with prosthetic use, and is it feasible for that person's particular lifestyle and choices. But I think in some cases, a wheelchair might be more stable for certain individuals, but it is not without its own set of problems. And again, going back to the example of the patient I'm currently working with, that from this person using a wheelchair, a previously completely independent person who was going to the gym, and because they had to use a wheelchair for several months, there's a lot of complications that have come from that, right? And there's a lot of injuries that can come from using a wheelchair all the time. Okay, so make no mistake, there's no, there's one extreme and then there's the other extreme. And again, each person really needs to, first of all, decide which mode of mobility will give them the most amount of independence in their life, because I think that's kind of the priority when it comes to mobility, is what is the max amount of independence that we can get a person to do, okay, and which mode is the best way for them to do that. Now, if they are a full-time wheelchair user, trust me, they need to be working on a lot of things. And I have a couple of people here who are full-time wheelchair users that I know that they can echo my sentiments. A lot of things that you need to be doing to prevent injuries, right? And to maintain your overall fitness and health. Okay. So as humans, we were designed to be up and walking and moving all day long. We were not designed to be sitting in a wheelchair for the majority of our day. We weren't. Okay, so there's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration if that happens to be the way that you choose to do your mobility. Okay, let's see. Leanne says, Cosi, sending California hugs. You're so right. Finding activities that make us happy and at the same time challenge us is so important. Aquatic activities have always been my jam. I love aquatic activities. And I knew I needed to learn something on land that could give me the same type of challenges because of the amazing people with enhancing skills for life and connections with the Amputee Coalition. I have been learning physical, mental, and mechanics, along with using a lot of humor to once again be able to bowl 4 limbs and a 10-pound bowling ball. That is impressive. That's impressive. That's impressive. So yes, and I think for me, like personally, I love running and I actually love swimming. I used to swim varsity on high school team, so I love swimming as well. For my patients, again, I live in Florida. I love swimming. I love water aerobics. I love gentle swimming. I've taught some of my patients how to swim again. Love it. So next to walking, I think swimming is the best exercise for the human body. Penny, oh, thank you for clarifying, Penny, if I had osteoporosis. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about that because actually we had a question here about osteoporosis. I can't talk right now, guys. Sorry, osteoporosis. And it was actually Pam. Pam said, what might be some challenges maneuvering with an AK prosthesis for someone diagnosed with osteoporosis with their residual hip and femur? So actually, Penny, what's interesting is the studies, here's the reason behind. So when it comes to your bone, right, your bone, much like all the other cells in your body, is turning over. It's remodeling. Old bone cells die off, new bone cells are formed in the bone marrow, and the new bone is formed. Now, it is formed on the basis of something called Wolff's Law. Okay, so I guess some guy named Wolff a long time ago discovered, I guess that's how it happened, that a bone is stimulated to produce more bone cells when it has weight put through it. Okay, so the act of walking stimulates your bone. That weight bearing of walking stimulates your bone to produce more bone. And that's interesting if you think about it, because your skin doesn't work that way. Like the skin cells that renew on our skin and the new skin cells we make every day, it's not because you're putting weight on your skin. That renews with some other process, right? But bone specifically, okay, it builds new bone when there is weight being put through it. So what happens when you become an amputee, specifically an above the knee amputee, okay? When you're using a prosthesis, you're not putting weight through your bone anymore. You're not supposed to be putting weight through your bone, right? The soft tissue, your thigh muscles, your glute muscles, that's what takes up the body weight, and it's distributed throughout your socket, unless you're an OI user. And they got their own, they have their own categories over there, right? So over the course of time, okay, your bone is not receiving stimulation. It's not forming new bone cells. So what happens is you start to experience bone loss and you become osteopenic and then eventually osteoporotic. Okay, so yes, and that is something that needs to be treated very carefully. And again, with the aging process, especially for our women, right, we're already going to be prone to osteoporosis. Good heavens, I can't speak today. Osteoporosis. Okay, and this is something, especially if you've been an amputee for more than a few years, you should have checked with your doctor, right? They should be doing a bone scan on your hips, even as below the knee amputees, because again, as below the knee amputees, you're not putting weight through the bone in your leg, okay, to determine your bone health and how it's doing, okay? Now, the prescription for osteoporosis is exercise. It's weight bearing. Okay, so staying in a wheelchair is not going to help you with osteoporosis. If anything, it'll make it even worse. Now, do you have to be careful when you exercise, especially if you have severe osteoporosis? Yes. Should you be under the guidance of a physical therapist while you're doing this? Yes. Okay, because there are certain movements that you have to be careful with, and in some extreme cases, try to avoid, specifically twisting and rotational movements. Okay, but actually a lot of people have that misconception, Penny, where they think that if they have a severe case of osteoporosis, that they need to stay in the wheelchair to make sure that they don't get hurt, and this can actually work against them. Now, obviously, we have to be very careful, right? We have to be careful when it comes to fall risks. We have to work on our balance. We have to work on those things. But there is a compromise there. And again, this is where working with a physical therapist can help you with these things so that you will be safe, okay, with this. And yes, if it means having to use a cane or a walker to prevent falls and to keep you safe, then yes, of course, by all means, okay? But the act of walking, even if you're not putting weight through the prosthesis and putting weight through that bone in the prosthesis, walking and doing certain other weight-bearing exercises is going to help with that, okay? Paul says, agree. My pet peeve was the MD who takes the crutches away from a patient after I spent 3 weeks getting the edema out of their knee, and they tweak the knee and it blows up again. Yeah. Robert says, I'm 80-20. I use my prosthetic 80% and the wheelchair at night. Yeah. Bill, thank you for being here. It's always a pleasure to see you. Mark says, the heavy bag worked for me while I was in the wheelchair to gain and maintain aerobic strength. I still use it now along with a stationary bike to maintain. Guys, you know what my favorite exercise is? And this is something that I just picked up when I was working home health, and not even necessarily home health patients who were amputees, just my elderly patients who were homebound. Those little bicycles for your feet that you can get at Walmart, like nothing fancy, just literally 2 pedals that you can do this. You take those 2 pedals, you put it on your kitchen table, and you have an upper extremity ergometer. Favorite way for a wheelchair exerciser. Let's see, Blue Diva says, I have to have infusions for my osteoporosis since becoming a left AK. And again, guys, it is, and I have to, this is kind of going to prod me right now because I do need to kind of look up the literature now in terms of what is the latest when it comes to prescription and the pharmacology side of management of osteoporosis. But the exercise component is still holding strong. And this was something that when I was a student in physical therapy school, were some of the larger studies that came out showing how important it was for women to do weight-bearing exercises. I remember it was a particular study showing women who were lifting like 2-pound weights. It wasn't even anything dramatically heavy, just lifting simple 2-pound weights to help with the osteoporosis in their wrists and the impact that it had. And that particular study showed that the effects of strength training, okay, gave the same benefits as some of the medications that they were giving people, right? So it's kind of incredible. And that has stayed the same. The medications may have changed, and I have to catch myself up. I'm going to hold myself accountable to that one. But, you know, from an exercise standpoint, those benefits have remained the same. Emily says, since I haven't been able to use my prosthesis much yet, I have to rely on my wheelchair and I still feel out of shape. And it's frustrating because I'm not as independent as I was before amputation. It's been a real challenge to relearn life without a lower limb. Yeah. And I know that you are working hard, Emily, and that you're not giving up. Blue Diva says, as well as maintaining my fitness, thankfully, I can still wear my prosthesis 5 days a week. I do CrossFit, Pilates, and weight training. That's awesome. Richard, happy to have you on board. So yeah, Paul, DEXA scans to check for osteopenia, osteoporosis, women over 65, men over 70. And actually, I think that's looking for even women younger than 65. We're starting to find those even younger at that point. Emily says, I have an arm bike that I should use more often. Yes, yes, I agree. Penny says it would be very helpful to hear about any new medications. Yes. And Penny, I will say this, although I need to catch up on my literature when it comes to the medication side. One trend that I've noticed in the 3 decades that I've been in healthcare is when you combine strength training with diet modification and what I call just of medication in severe cases, that's when you have the best outcomes when it comes to osteoporosis. Okay, if it's only medication, if it's only one thing or the other, in the severe cases, then I feel like there's not the best outcome. The best outcomes is when you are looking at the whole picture and you're making those lifestyle modifications, you're making the strength gains there with weight training, and if absolutely needed, the use of pharmacology. But what I find is, you know, the pharmacology is in the extreme cases. And again, that's the trend I've seen over 3 decades. I need to dive a little bit more into that literature. Blue Diva says, definitely double check the infusion name as I'm from the UK. And yes, Blue Diva, there's definitely so many different medications out there, and many of these medications have pretty intense side effects. So that's why I'm always very cautious and saying, yeah, y'all need to we need to do our homework to learn more about that. All right, guys, let's see. Okay, guys, there are 2 more questions that unfortunately I'm not going to be able to get to tonight, but I will be bringing them to the show next week. So if I did not answer your question tonight, I do apologize. For those of you who have not already joined, please consider joining my texting service. And here's how you do it. You will text Cosi Talks, all one word, capital letters, to this number. Okay. And you can send me text messages and text me your questions directly. This is also how I communicate the links whenever I go live. So it's a lot easier to find me that way. I don't spam you. I don't send you a bunch of junk mail, and I don't sell your number or anything crazy like that. So if you have not already done so, please sign up for the texting service right there. Okay, guys, I am talked out this evening. It was fun discussion, wasn't it, Sherry? And I appreciate those folks being on board, especially my colleague there, Paul. Thank you for jumping in. I appreciate it. And John C., I know you're there from San Diego. My prosthetist sitting in there with me as well. So, guys, thank you very much for your contributions. Guys, it has been a very long day for this mom of 4, and I will see you guys next week, another general Q&A session. All right, guys, as always, thank you for letting me be a part of your lives this evening. And I will see you guys next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.